You know how it is, right? We hear these big calls to action all the time. End world hunger or save the planet. These huge problems that seem like they need, well, huge solutions. But what about the everyday struggles? What about the things happening right here, right now in our own backyards?
Yeah, the stuff we can easily miss when we're focused on the big picture.
Exactly. And that's what we're diving into today. The often overlooked world of single mothers. We're talking about the very real challenges they face, what those challenges reveal about our society, and maybe even what it means for how we live out our faith.
It's about bringing those big ideas down to earth, seeing how they play out in the lives of real people.
100%. And our guide for this deep dive is an article by Jamin Bradley. He's a pastor who brings this really interesting mix of experience to the table. He's working directly with this community, but also coming from this deeply theological viewpoint.
That combination of lived experience and the moral, the theological, it's so crucial to this kind of conversation.
Totally. He could have just hit us with a bunch of statistics, but Bradley really makes this real through the story of Joan, a single mom in his congregation. And her situation, man, it just grabbed me from the get-go. 5 kids, struggling to even keep a roof over their heads, dealing with an abusive ex. He even mentioned she had to cancel their internet because putting food on the table is more important.
It's heartbreaking, and tragically, it's not uncommon. We hear those stats, 30% of female-headed households falling below the poverty line. But Joan, she embodies that. She puts a face, a name, a story to what can feel like this overwhelming abstract issue. And her struggles, while unique to her, they reflect the systemic problems that so many single mothers face every day.
It really makes you think twice about that whole just get a job argument, doesn't it?
Yeah, that falls apart pretty quickly when you look at the numbers. The article points out that in Michigan, where Joan lives, even if you're working full-time at minimum wage, you're bringing in just over $21,000 a year. That's still within the lowest income bracket, and that's before even thinking about childcare costs, which are insane.
It's almost like the system is designed to keep people trapped.
And that's what gets me about Joan's story. It shines a light on those impossible choices single moms are forced to make every single day. Do you provide for your kids, or do you actually get to be there for them? Like, there's no winning.
And that's what struck me about the college loan detail. Joan took out a $7,000 loan for her daughter's college, even though her daughter had a full scholarship offer at a different school. Now, on the surface, someone might hear that and think, bad financial decision. But when you're living in survival mode, when you're clinging to any hope of a better future for your kids, doesn't that $7,000 represent something more than just bad math?
Right. It totally challenges those traditional ideas of financial responsibility. It makes you ask, what does responsible even mean when the basics are impossible, when the system is working against you at every turn?
It's like we expect people to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, but what happens when those bootstraps are, totally worn out, or maybe even missing altogether?
It's a powerful image, and it actually leads us to a part of Bradley's article that might surprise some folks. He makes this connection between the struggles of single moms like Joan and the abortion debate.
Yeah, that's definitely a topic that can get, well, pretty heated, but I do appreciate how carefully Bradley approaches it.
He really does. It's not like he shies away from it, but he frames it within this context of desperation, not just a lack of desire for children.
And that really hit me. This idea that for some women, facing these like seemingly insurmountable obstacles, abortion might feel like the only way out, not a choice anyone makes lightly.
Absolutely. And the statistics he brings up, they really underscore this. He mentions that 86% of women who have abortions are unmarried, 75% are economically disadvantaged, and here's the kicker, most of them already have children.
Wow, that last one is huge. That really changes things, doesn't it? It's not about not wanting a family. It's about being terrified of not being able to provide for one.
Right. It flips the script completely. It forces us to at least consider that for some, abortion isn't about a lack of love for children, but this deep fear of bringing them into a world where they feel like they can't even provide the basics.
It makes you wonder then if being truly pro-life means we need to go deeper than just the surface. Like we have to grapple with these root causes, these systemic issues that are leading to such desperate decisions in the first place.
Now, that's a question worth thinking about, because if we really truly value life, shouldn't we also be fighting for the conditions that allow life to thrive? I mean, shouldn't we want families to flourish, not just barely scrape by?
Absolutely. So then with all of that in mind, where does faith come in? Because it's obvious Bradley doesn't see this as just a social issue.
Yeah.
This is deeply spiritual for him.
Right. And this is where his perspective Being both a pastor in the thick of it and a theologian, it gets really interesting. He makes this argument that single mothers, especially those struggling financially, they're the modern-day equivalent of the widows that we see constantly in the Bible, the ones we're told over and over to care for.
Huh. You know, at first glance, I might have thought that was a bit of a stretch. But the more you think about it,
It starts to make a lot of sense. And Bradley, he digs into the original languages of the Bible, and he points out that the Hebrew and Greek words that often get translated as widow, they can actually have a much broader meaning. They can include any woman without the support of a husband, which puts single moms right there in that category, the most vulnerable, the ones who desperately need support.
and it goes beyond just like vulnerability. It gets to who God is calling his people to defend.
Correct.
Like in Exodus, there's that part where he talks about hearing the cries of the oppressed.
Oh, absolutely. Exodus 22.2 to 24. And Bradley quotes it, you can practically hear the passion in his voice. It's not about, checking a box. This isn't just charity. This is about reflecting God's own heart. It's about caring for those who are hurting, the ones who are overlooked, the ones who've been underserved for far too long.
Yeah, yeah. It's about putting action behind our beliefs. It's putting our faith, however we understand that, into practice in the real world. So, okay, saying we care about this issue, it's easy. But what does actually doing something look like? Like, what does Bradley actually propose we do?
So he kind of takes this two-pronged approach. He recognizes that we need to address those big systemic problems, but also that there's an individual call to action here too. On the larger scale, Bradley challenges churches. He says they need to step up and become these beacons of tangible support for single mothers.
Okay, so not just offering kind words, but actual practical help.
Exactly. Like, he talks about churches establishing pantries, but not just for food. He's talking about providing toiletries and those essential items that often fall through the cracks. Childcare support is another big one, creating programs that can help alleviate that crushing financial burden. And get this, he even suggests offering job assistance programs, like legit job training and also legal aid services, helping single moms navigate the system, all that bureaucratic stuff, which can be completely overwhelming.
Wow, okay, that's incredible. It's one thing to just say, let's help people, but it's another thing entirely to create these really practical, essential lifelines.
He really wants churches to be known for offering real hands-on support, not just vague
Right.
platitudes. And then on that individual level, Bradley, he challenges each of us. Like, as people of faith, he asks us to really examine our own generosity. Are we willing to step up when we see a need, even in small ways?
Because it's so easy to get caught up in our own lives,
Right.
right? Our own struggles, our own to-do list.
Mhm.
It's easier to just tune out those cries for help. You know what I mean? And I feel like Bradley, he wants us to shift our perspective,
Mhm.
to see those requests for help, those moments like Joan brought to him, not as a burden, but as,
Opportunities.
yeah,
Opportunities to actually live out our faith, like to actually show God's love, but in a real, tangible way that can make a difference in someone's life.
yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And it makes you think about that line in the article, the one that really stuck with me, where Bradley says, no one should be facing the kind of pressure that she is under in the first place.
Yeah.
That one really landed hard.
Yeah, that's such a powerful statement. And it makes you ask yourself, are we, maybe even in little ways we don't realize, are we contributing to that pressure by our inaction or worse, by judging those who are struggling?
It's a lot to think about. It really is. And it brings us back to where we started, right? This idea that the struggles of one single mother, they can shed light on these larger societal issues and even challenge how we understand our own faith.
Mm-hmm.
We took a deep dive into this one article, but man, it's opened the door to some really important questions.
It really has. And maybe the biggest takeaway, the question Bradley leaves us wrestling with is, how do we redefine what it means to be pro-life? Is it just about protecting the unborn? Or does it also mean creating a world where single mothers, they're supported, empowered to choose life, but not out of desperation, out of hope?
Man, that's something we could all spend a little more time thinking about. And what I appreciate is that Bradley, he doesn't give us easy answers. He just invites us to open our eyes, to look around at the needs in our own communities, to examine our own hearts, and just remember that even those small acts of compassion, those moments of generosity, they can make a world of difference in the lives of those who need it most.